This is Gerald Johan van Waas and the educational channel related with the theory of sounding form and also about the meaning of letters and letter combinations. Someone once asked me, why do you need these? Would you, in God's sake, change letters and letter combinations into forms, and what do we need it for? So if we have it or we don't, and there's not much difference. And I tell you that by knowing this theory, you also have a larger frame of associations possible and connections possible from what is based in language in the time frames. All the letters are combined together, are combining together, and are going references working together in a fourth-dimensional time frame. And that is important. To understand each other, we must also realize how these connections are interconnected within this time frame. And I give you the example that I once had in one of the other videos. I had the example of the word camp. And I also said there that there are three kinds of reference points in the letters of three levels of difficulty. The first level of difficulty are the placements in time, at a place, simply as that. The other ones are the delays. So you have delays that also need time, can use time, so that we can know, like, okay, we don't have it now, but sooner or later we will get it at a certain point. And these are the time frames. So we move something, we change something, and we need a time frame for it. If we go back to what we have and see that, okay, maybe I have to, what I did, having a delay in time and so on. If I want to be really more practical, I have to go back to the three-dimensional frame and have a reorientation and say, okay, here I have a good balance with all of this, and now I succeed to recreate this balance with reorientation in time and space. These are also the third level of difficulty of letters. These three levels of difficulty are needed to understand the full picture of all the letters and how they work together. And I had the example of camp, and I go back to it for a certain reason. When I take out the letters and see where they are there in the word, I can see that most of the letters are related with space. So this is a spatial reference, but there's only one aspect of time which makes all these letters dependent. And this is presented as such that you can have the camp is the rising, the putting up of a camp of a three-dimensional space at a certain point in time when you need it. And this is actually a time reference, which is a bit different as we are used to it, because I also said in my book that the time is a three-dimensional frame. I could or maybe should put it also a little bit differently. The time frames are connected and interconnected in a three-dimensional space, and also as separate connections in a three-dimensional space. That means that sometimes the time frame can be connected not just to the horizontal plane, but also into a diagonal plane, so that you can say, now I have a moment. The moment is a vertical section in the time frame. I have a moment, and there I choose a certain moment which has the connections that I need there, and that is a vertical direction of time. We have a traditional intersection of time that we think that everything in history, everything in time goes from one point to the next into with a long line, a sliced line, an intersection of time where everything fits upon and everything goes from one thing to the next. That's our traditional vision. And on this frame there are at certain points moments. There are just points in this sliced intersection, but the way how they are interconnected, why the moments are taken out and have a vertical dimension in time, also says that we have interconnections in the three-dimensional space that makes it work. The moment, the now, has interconnections, and we have conditions, and they are interconnected with the conditions, and when these conditions are met, then we can also establish it that this vertical plane starts to exist. I think that's something you can understand. But the time frame and the delays can also be expressed in a more simple way. Delays, in a way, can also be expressed in not just in three dimensionals plus one, as I did here, but I can also express them already in 2 dimensions. And I will do that now in this video. When I have, for instance, a 3-dimensional cube and I present it on a paper, if I do that very regularly, as I want to express it as regular as possible, it is a bit confusing because the lines overlap, and they always overlap, and you can hardly see where there's a 2-dimensional frame or where there's a 3-dimensional frame. So I have to make, if I also put bricks onto it, and I see, okay, there's a very regular frame, and actually it's very hard to see what is in front, what is at the back, and so on. You can't do that. It's too confusing. These overlaps are confusing. So I look for solutions. It's the same way as from the 3-dimensional to the 4th dimension. I look for solutions that I won't get to the regular intersection in a regular form immediately. I can't do that. I have to show what is going from one frame to the next. So I have to put an extra movement to it, an extra movement, so that I can show what is going on a bit slower. I'll slow it down a little bit. I slow the process a little bit. I create an extra space in the middle, as you can see. If I do that a bit too regular, it's no longer that's one of the things that you can have if you draw a cube and you don't know very well what you're doing, but do it just intuitively and don't deal with all the aspects. It's no longer a cube. This is more like a stretched cube, so it is not fitting. So I have the intersections, the differences are more visible, but it's the length is no longer correct. So I have to put it back, and if I put it back again, it will be impossible to do so with a regularity. As you can see, again, these lines start to overlap. So I have to do it differently. I have to make an extra solution. I have to make a way to make a delay work and still have a regularity that I can work with. So let's do so. So here I will change the angle, and I change the angle in a slightly different perspective. So I move it a little bit. I move the frame still regular. I have, instead of having 3 frames, I use 2 frames and make the cube visible. Now I can see the differences and so on. So this deviation from regularity made me actually change the angle. So I changed the diagonal. So I had actually an extra push or pull in the diagonal plane to make my delay. It's a little bit the same as adding an extra dimension as a tryout. This is a tryout. I don't know the angle. I try out a different angle so that I will go there and see that I can distinctive all the differences in this way. And if this regularity is correct, then I have found a frame that works so that I can calculate the regularity in it. And this regularity was for me again 1/3, 2/3. It's this third vision that helped me to make the perspective, to have good calculation in showing what I do. This is my technique of perspective. When I compare this with the theory, it is in the 2-dimensional frame, and instead of in the 3-dimensional frame +1, I have a 2-dimensional +1. The tryout is done in the middle, so this is my irregular move. This is my delay in so that I can show what I have, all the elements that I have, that I can slowly develop and see all the differences a little bit better, so that in the end I have my restored reference points that I can show all the regularities without that the balance is completely irregular. Something like that. It's a very simple comparison on the 2-dimensional frame, just to show, like, let's have an extra push or pull with an extra dimension so that I can find out if what kind of balances work or what doesn't. Now I go to the 3-dimensional frame then. Here I have the 3-dimensional reference points in space, and then the delays also in 3 directions. And if I put them together, I have, let's say that I have in the middle, I start from a white square, and I'll go to the diagonal, horizontal, vertical direction with a delay. I have here then 3 versions, 3 directions, and 3 extra visions from the same thing. I have the red vision, the blue vision, and the green vision, let's say. Pushed aside completely, I also already see how much I had this delay. This delay you can see already in the middle. This was my technique that I used. This was my technique of projection, so that I can have 3 frames. And if I look at what balance I had in totality and put it back into a frame, I can also find the original projection again. So I show myself what kind of projection that I used, and I'm back into balance in my normal 3-dimensional space. It's just a comparison, but that's a comparison that you have into the layers. You make an experiment, you make a projection into the next dimension, and you go back to the original frame, but it moved. It showed our new position from our perspective that we used a certain equation, let's say, of a projection, and that is our frame in our next move. And then we also realize what kind of projection that we used. This is just a thought experiment, but the thought experiment also says how we deal with things in life in a very simple geometrical way. We have the 3-dimensional cube, we have the projection that we use to show the differences, the red, the green, and the blue, and then from there we can also find out what kind of projection we used and find our move, our realization, our new vision, where we move to. So we started from a space we use time or movement to find out other variations and always come back to our realization and vision. It's a very simple expression, but it's I will give you now an example that it is actually very important that we have reference points of projections, of delays in time, and then at a certain points we can use them and frame them. A lot of words are the potential, or could also be potential frames that we frame sooner or later. I have an example. The song of the singing is also something like that. Has like in the time frame, it goes infinitely from one place. The singing itself has no reference point with a starting point or an ending point. Singing is just singing. There's no starting point. But the singing gives it a reference point from a reference point mostly in time or at a certain point in space, and a certain point also with our feedback system. Oh, here we can use something in it for a certain time frame, for a certain space. These subtle differences with time and space are important for a lot of words, and we would almost forget them. We would almost not feel them, sense them anymore, and we would forget to understand each other. It's the same with in language, that we have a lot of different timings that we use. For instance, in verbs you can say we have bought this. I ought to buy this. I should have bought this. I might have bought this. I was buying this. If you would not understand the differences between these, there's something completely wrong. You don't learn it in techniques very much in school, but you learn it to use it. You learn practically to use it and distinguish the differences between these different aspects of getting involved at the time frame, or getting away from a time frame, leaving the time frame open, and so on. These kind of differences are important, and this is also what the theory is about, that you distinguish these things better. That's one of the things that is important. In English it is, of course, you have the song, the singing part, the canto, the cantus. For words like in Dutch you have zang or gezang, which are different and subtly different. If you put hut, the to it, hut gezang, de zang, it's changing the things. The zangpartij, the singing part, is different than the singing. The frame, there's a frame here. So here I have, for instance, zang, or the singing, the canto, let's say, and the zang. I have the word de here. It is the frame. It immediately frames it. With zang, you have no beginning, no end. Zang is an expression of a certain balance, but with the zang, it is expressing that kind of balance, but within time frame. It fits there, it's placed and it's framed. And just as an example that we really use frame making aspects in words, is the difference between zang and de zang, or singing and the singing. There's already a strong difference of emphasis, and the, you can see, is in this frame of I make this experiment, that I place it into a time frame in my experiment of I will see what I will do with it. Over time, I will see what I can do with it. This is the red things there. So what are these reference points of the in the Dutch version? And the D is a reference point. That is actually saying like I have here center position of focus with a certain delay. And the A is the reference point that is showing how the full progress of material is also having not just a delay, but it has over a certain length, is taking in a certain length of time most of the time. So that is what it's doing. So it is framing it. It's reorganizing a frame, and that's what it's doing. That's the difference between zang and de zang. That's a small difference. I also have gezang, so the singing itself. So I have here the expression with the G with a large. It's also the more abstract thing of saying it's singing. It has this frame of the singing or zangen or gezang. It will emphasize on a certain balance of elements. With het gezang, it's focused more or less on what it really is. What is the reference point, not in time and so on, but what is the reference point of what is going on here? What is the balance here? Het is that kind of reference points, not just in time, not just in place, but also what is going on here, what is running here, what is the process itself. That's also a possibility with het, the or de in certain in languages and in use in languages. So ge zang instead of zang, so also the ge makes a certain order. What is that kind of order? All the letters are here, as you can see. Something is with placement, some of the letters are related with delays, and one letter is connected with reorganization, with the feedback process, with the order. And how do you see that zang or gezang? So what's the difference? The G is of course the goal. So you make with gezang, you make a certain goal into a time frame. If you don't use that, it's just zang. So zang itself. So you start from the regular time frame. After that time frame, regular time frame, infinitely, you go to a certain placement on a time frame again, and then in order to give it a certain feedback process, a certain order in the feedback. So zang itself is this whole balance of what can go on, what is going on. It's an expression, and this expression has the goal that I want to do something with. I have a feedback, I want to use it for a feedback process. With gezang, you really use this word specifically when you refer, for instance, to a certain music piece, and then you say, okay, this I will take out this part for a certain purpose of expression to organize it in time. While zangin itself, or the singing itself, has already a possibility of what it's going to be used for in a time frame, in a placement, and then will have its feedback process. That's a kind of way you can derive things from it, from letters alone. This way of thinking might not be clear for everybody why it is necessary that you learn the subtle differences of the time frames, but they will become practical if you know, and also with translation they will. As a bonus extra, I also give you all the letters as frames, as pinpointing the placements in time, placements in delays, and the placements as in reorganization, and its feedback process in giving it a general order. Here are all the letters. It's not easy to use them, to combine them and then see what it means, but separately you can learn something with these different expression than I have, for instance, in my book or in the other videos. Okay, this was Gerald Van Waas. There's a website too. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel if you like for more instructions and examples. Thanks. Bye-bye.